Only a 12th level intellect has the slightest hope of surviving what you are about to experience.
I'm going to read to you from Choose Your Own Adventure, Clayface Returns, the book.
Okay.
And I want you to choose what happens.
Great. Yeah, that sounds fun.
So we're going to start in the middle of the book to be as confusing as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. It's okay. Whoosh! It's Batman, somebody shouts. The crowd cheers even more. Batman? Tim and Bruce both exclaim. They exchange nervous looks. I didn't know the Cape Crusader took part in publicity stunts, Commissioner Gordon says. If Bruce and Tim watch what happens next, go to page 27. If Bruce and Tim change into Batman and Robin, turn to page 40.
Let's change to where Bruce Timm does these things instead. It's Bruce.
Is that your answer?
Yeah, Bruce Timm, the producer.
That's not in the book anymore.
Well, that's because it's on the show.
I don't see
he's
this.
the showrunner. So
I see now the joke you've made about the names Bruce and Tim.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 12th Level Intellects, where we make great puns like these.
We do.
All the time. That's the slogan, all caps.
We make great puns like these.
Yeah, my name's James Strecker, and this is Ted Kendrick. Say hi, Ted Kendrick.
Hi, Ted Kendrick.
Please don't say the phrase. Hi, Ted Kendrick. Yeah, you did it. You did it. This is a DC Animated Universe podcast. We talk about that sometimes. We usually actually have a DC Comics in general kind of focus, but
we do. We dropped Bruce Timm's name today. We started strong.
Yeah, that's true. And we're talking with Matthew Manning today. He's a writer for Batman TMNT Adventures and Justice League Adventures and all sorts of other stuff that we didn't get to talk.
He has a lot of grand adventures.
The man likes to talk.
We didn't have a whole lot of time either. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back on the podcast sometime soon for a part 2. But yeah, it's a good interview. I think we chat about some cool stuff.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and he definitely seems like someone that likes to talk about what they do, which is nice because I don't think we've ever gotten someone that hasn't, but I've been like really worried about we'll get an interview with some editor or something, and then it'll be like, oh, so tell us about how you got into the industry.
Oh, let's not talk about me. Let's talk about you.
For the job.
Enough about me.
Oh.
Let's talk about you, James.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you see, I like drawing Batman, so.
Who doesn't?
Okay. So news stuff. I'm looking at DC is starting a couple of new imprints for younger readers.
That's right.
They're starting DC Zoom, which is aimed at middle schoolers, and DC Ink, which is aimed at quote-unquote young adults, which I would assume
that sounds about right. I figure
it's
it's because Zoom went back in time to kill the Flash's mom when he was a middle schooler, and then
oh boy,
Ink from Batman Beyond is a little older.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this, but let's not do this now. I mean, that's the slogan of the podcast, but that's okay.
Let's not do this now.
There's a couple of cool things that are coming out on that. There's going to be a Harley Quinn graphic novel, a Mira graphic novel. There's one for, what the heck, I saw it earlier. Oh, Super Sons. There's Batman's son, Superman's son together. These are like aimed specifically at younger readers because I think that the reason why this is probably happening is that like a lot of the current DC stuff is pretty heady and full of like references to stuff from the 80s and 90s that like nobody who's wanting to pick up a comic for the first time is going to understand.
Yeah, it's like we got to go to the heart.
Doomsday clock,
right?
Metal.
Or like the heart of the Rock of Eternity, and then like
Yeah.
puncture the Anti-Monitor's astral brain.
Yeah,
You know, like
right.
Yeah, which happened in Metal.
I know what that is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I kind of respect that, and it's funny because one of the titles is going to be Superman smashes the Klan, or Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan.
I think that's more of a retelling, though. No,
or...
I think it's like a historical thing where it goes back and like talks about how the character of Superman like actually fought the ideology of the KKK like historically in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, okay, because that makes more sense, because I was like, the Ku Klux Klan is just going to get their asses handed to them immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, we got pitchforks and horses. Yeah.
Those white robes are going to turn very brown by the end of it. Brown and red.
God, yeah. Oh, boy. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, I apologize. By the way, we're on iTunes now, so if you're listening to this on YouTube... stop.
Why? Yeah, stop that.
Because it's probably way more annoying to listen to. Well, I mean, yeah, you could continue to listen on YouTube if you want to. It's probably a lot harder and stupider to keep your phone on or to have a tab open or whatever.
iTunes lets you
a normal person
close it.
Listen to us on iTunes now.
Right.
So anyway, that's all I got on that, because that's pretty ridiculous sounding, but I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Ku Klux Klan, the true story of how the iconic superhero battled the men of hate.
It's a true story. That's what I'm saying. True story. So I was going to talk about Black Panther. It is coming out very soon.
Yes.
And it has gotten early reviews, just came out, and it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. People are saying it is the best Marvel movie so far and by far. So I can't wait. I'm really excited to hear all that praise.
That's good to hear, yeah.
Yeah, it's got an amazing cast. Kendrick Lamar's doing the soundtrack. It just has a lot of really interesting things going for it. Ryan Coogler, the director of Creed, is on.
Is that this week?
It is late February. So I think...
I'm sad to not know that.
I think it's in like 2 or 3 weeks. Probably 2 weeks by the time this episode airs.
Here comes typing sounds. Typing sounds. Black Panther... release date / James should know this, February 16th.
Oh, so next week. Yeah. Cool.
Or this week.
Awesome. Yeah, that's gonna be great.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to that. It looks very different. We talked to when we were talking with Jesse, we talked about that movie quite a bit last week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm wondering how it really like turns the genre on its head kind of stuff, because everybody's saying that, but then it looks other than the fact that it's very different looking visually than a lot of Marvel movies. Like, I wonder how different it will actually be with plot and stuff, or if it's just kind of being like what's the right word, not overshadowed, but like if it's getting a lot of press because like, oh, it's like black superheroes, it's set in Africa, like it's all very different, that kind of stuff, and very diverse and whatever, or if maybe underlying the movie is not that much different than say Ant-Man or Iron Man or that kind of origin story. But
right.
I haven't seen it, and I'm sorry if I'm offending you by saying this, but I look forward.
I think it's too early to judge it yet. I mean, I'm really excited about these early reviews and definitely looking forward to seeing it.
Let's see.
Hold on.
Okay. I don't know what Ted's doing.
Just some cat mayhem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just cats being cats.
That's a good. Are you done talking about Black Panther?
I have nothing else to say. I haven't watched it yet, so.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, where did it go? Oh, there's on the same kind of topic. There's another DC miniseries coming out called The Other History of the DC Universe, and it's focusing on like minority kind of characters like Jon Stewart, Vixen, Renee Montoya, that kind of stuff, which is cool because I think that those characters don't get the spotlight as much as they should in general, not necessarily for any like racial reason, but just they're not Jon Stewart was my Green Lantern growing up because I watched the cartoon first before anything else, but now it's all Hal Jordan or whatever.
Well, I mean, Jon Stewart's still there.
Cyborg and stuff, but he always
Jon Stewart's still like in the Green
Lantern
Lantern Corps book, but it's
Jordan
it's called Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps.
So.
But then we also have Vixen as the leader of the Justice League of America right now. So she's
okay.
still very much front and center there. But, you know, I'm still saying it's great to have all this additional content.
Yeah.
Do you know if Renee Montoya is going to be as a cop or the Question?
I have no idea. It just says her name lists her name as one of the characters.
Cool.
Is there a different Supergirl right now other than the normal one?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because
there's
it lists all these characters.
Power Girl? There's a Power Girl that was
Okay.
in the Deathstroke book who is black. So I don't know. I haven't been reading that book.
Okay, because this is like Jon Stewart, Vixen, Katana, Renee Montoya, all these non-white characters, and then Supergirl is also listed, so I'm just confused why she's there. She's an alien. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see.
But that's pretty cool. And then
Yeah.
I'm going to sneak in one final thing that's uncalled for, but they're changing Batman's costume again. Hopefully you weren't going to talk about that.
Only when we're talking about Doomsday Clock.
Okay, we can get.
We'll mention it again.
We can wait.
Cool. So we had the Super Bowl, and with the Super Bowl,
Yes.
there was a bunch of trailers and stuff.
Yeah.
We got a new Mission Impossible trailer, Jurassic World. We got Han Solo, and I think the Han Solo one is worth talking about more than anything, because it finally happened. It comes out in 3 months, and it was like the first promotional material that we've seen of it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking Disney was going to be hesitant about releasing that kind of stuff. Like, they're playing it very close to chest. But the trailer and the teaser looks decent so far.
Yeah.
It doesn't look bad. I think it's going to be worth a watch. But we'll see.
It has the when they made Rogue One, it looked like the color grading and like style of the. Like, I think they probably like filmed it on film and stuff like that. Like, it kind of is. It looks like an older Star Wars movie intentionally. But seeing that same style applied to Solo, for some reason, doesn't sit well with me, and I don't know why. Like, I think maybe the Rogue One story, how it's so like gritty and like, oh, it's like a heist and that kind of thing, like fits that kind of more desaturated, sad look. But like Han Solo is supposed to be all this like, you know, a scruffy looking nerf herder.
He's got the swagger.
Big adventure, Indiana Jones. Yeah, the swagger is good.
And they're still saying this is supposed to be the funniest Star Wars movie yet. Like, he was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly today, and it said like the funniest Star Wars movie yet. I don't know if that's going to happen now that Ron Howard took over, because it had the whole drama behind the change of directors. Originally it was Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, right?
I think so. Yeah,
that sounds right.
That might be the Flash
21 Jump
movie,
Street
movie. I can't remember.
It was a
the
pair of
Flash
directors.
Movie and Solo have had so
okay.
many different director changes, but he, obviously people are this way and that way about whether he looks enough like Han Solo and all this stuff, but I don't really care. Like, they're not gonna make him. At least they're not doing like a CGI de-aging of Harrison Ford or something. That would be pretty hard to watch. For however long the movie is. So I'm fine with it. I'll just see the movie. How about that? How about go watch the movie and find out for yourself what you think of it?
That sounds fair.
Novel concept.
I'm pretty excited about Donald Glover. Donald Glover playing Lando Calrissian. I think that's gonna be pretty sweet. And it seems like he's signed on to do that role in a couple other movies potentially too.
Okay, cool.
From what I hear.
I was a little surprised that he looks as 70s as he does, but I think that you kind of have to. Like, you can't just de-70s that character. So.
Yeah. That's part of the fun. So
yeah.
Well, cool.
That's
it for the news. I guess now we're gonna talk to Matthew Manning.
Right now,
we've
not
already
yesterday,
recorded
but
this.
right now.
right now. With us today is Matt Manning. Yeah, you're James. This is Matt Manning, writer of the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Adventures and various other stuff for DC, Marvel, just a comics professional writer we've got here. I'm at his house. You can't see that because this is an audio podcast.
I can see it.
Yeah. So we've got Matt with us today. How are you doing, Matt?
Not too bad.
Sweet. Thanks for being on. We've had you sort of on before. I've interviewed you at a noisy bar. That you'll find that interview on the Watchtower Database somewhere. It actually sounds pretty good for considering the setting.
Let's go.
So the audio is good. I was at the North Carolina Comic-Con last year and recorded your panel with John Somervilla. I guess we'll get started. We'll talk about the Ninja Turtles Adventures. So it wrapped up, the last issue, it was probably about a year ago, right? It's been out for a minute.
I think so, yeah. I keep seeing it in like my Facebook memories. When I was
right. I think so if it's Facebook memories, it's been a minute. I think the entire collection came out in the summer. And so we've had like a couple months to, read it. Hopefully all of our listeners have read it. And
spoilers ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to start off by saying that the first issue sold out 2 weeks in advance, which is awesome. I always want to bring that up because I think it's so cool. It was one of IDW's best-selling comics of the year. And so I guess walk us through how you got that gig and what it was kind of like, why you were the right writer to handle these characters and have these animated versions meet each other.
Well, I was originally working on the two Ninja Turtles animated books that they had before then. It was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles New Animated Adventures, and then the book after that was Ninja Turtles, and it was Amazing Adventures. So,
was that like a reboot?
Yeah, they rebooted it. Originally they were going to change the format completely, and then they just didn't end up doing that at all. So just kind of like a reboot, I guess, just to get people interested in it again.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of worked on, and John and I actually worked on a story together on one of those, and he did a couple. I want to say he did at least one of the covers for one of the issues, or maybe a couple because variant covers. It's hard to keep straight because there was like three covers for each one of those. And then before that, I had worked on I got my start in comics working in the Bruce Timm animated universe with Justice League Adventures number 14, I think it was the
M33.
Well, M33. That was my second one. Yeah,
we'll talk about this for sure.
Yeah. So so I got started working on those, and then I went on and did the Batman Strikes, which tied into the Batman cartoon. So I had a lot of experience doing animated books. I did Beware the Batman recently. Before that series got canceled,
and
right out of the gate.
Legion of Superheroes.
Oh yeah, and Legion of I think it was the book was called. It was like Legion of Superheroes in 31st Century because they had no idea what to call it.
Yeah. We'll talk about that soon. You wrote an issue about Arm Fallout.
Arm Fall Off Boy. Yes, I did. I love Arm Fall Off Boy. It's one of my favorite characters. But and so yeah, I guess I was just doing the Ninja Turtle books so much. They asked me if I wanted to submit for the Batman crossover, and I came up with an idea that they liked right away, and they sent it to the DC editor to approve, and he had some questions about it. And then I started just kind of answering all his questions and kind of putting all these. He had some concerns about, are we going to develop this enough? Will this twist be out of the blue? Is there going to be some hints towards it? And so once I kind of wrote him this really long email showing him all the points, of what I was going to do. And from that point, it just kind of seemed like I was on the book at that point. Like it was just like, they're like, okay, well, we're going to go with your idea. And I was like, oh, good. Because I only had like a week to come up with the idea, and I wish I would have had a little bit longer. But at that point, it was supposed to be a 5-issue series, and so that's what we just we plotted it out, and
it became a 6-issue series.
Yeah, and then
how far into it did you know?
I had the 5th issue completely finished, so the script for the issue 5 was completely turned in, and the story was over. And I was like, okay, well that was fun. And then they were like, yeah, well we realized our contract actually says you can do 6 issues, and since it was so popular, we want to do a 6th one. And I was like, can't just add an extra chapter, So. We thought about it, and my editor suggested, well, we've been teasing the Krang this whole time, so let's actually show an all-out battle with the Krang.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and I came up with the idea of I wanted to do it in the New Adventure style, and actually wanted to do it as a special, but I think that was going to be too confusing with the other Batman Turtles book to have a third Batman Turtles book issue 1 right kind of in the same time frame. So they did it as issue 6, and but I think it stands alone as its own epilogue, and then the coloring is just fantastic for that. They just nailed the look of the red skies of Gotham for the new Batman Adventures, and all the nice kind of deco rendering, a little like airbrushy type rendering on the buildings, and it was just like, I think it's kind of, I feel like we found our groove at issue 6, and then the series is over. It's like, oh, all right. But John and I tried to to convince DC to do new Batman Adventures, a new series about it, just Batman Adventures, and they so far no interest yet, but they just seem to think that it doesn't have the same nostalgic appeal that we know it has. And it's kind of like, oh,
there's definitely a fan base.
Well, there's also there's a stigma for all ages books that these are going to be something that's going to be a low seller no matter what. That's kind of what everybody at DC feels like. It's going to be a low seller. We're going to put it out and it'll probably sell more in say like digital or like a trade paperback or something where it's where I think we're at the point now where we're adults now that grew up as kids. We're fans of the animated series, so I think there is a fan base. They just had a huge DC collectibles line of action figures that were all purchased by adults. Really, I mean, there's not many kids playing with those. Like $175 Batwing, and so it's like I think the appeal's there. We just got to keep working on them and convincing them.
And they've like dabbled in the animated universe a little bit. Like there was the Batman Beyond 2.0 series. It was digital first, turned into Batman Beyond Unlimited. Justice League Beyond, Superman Beyond had its own book, and they
kind of put them all out in comics later, and then
and
they're still doing. I guess there's an animated. I think there's an animated Harley Quinn that tied into the animated Harley Quinn movie that they're doing digital. But that was kind of
Templeton and Rick Burchett of the classic Batman Adventures.
Yeah, but I think they're having the guys from the movie work on that, and we're like,
a little bit.
So
we talked to Ty Templeton a little bit. It's been interesting hearing his take on how that all came together. They brought back in the Task Force X and brought Harley into that, and that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I actually love his. He does his Bun Tunes, his his regular webcomic, and it's just that's incredible. So
he's great. Well, was there any content that you wanted to bring into Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that had to get cut for any reason?
There was a couple things. I mean, originally we were going to do, I don't know if we talked about this before, but I originally wanted it to be a Killer Croc fight in the sewer.
I was going to bring up that you had said that before,
yeah. So that was, and then reading the first one, I was like, oh, we can't do that. And then, I think it worked out for the better when they let me say Mudbutt, and that at least that really, my daughters really enjoyed the fact that we can call Clayface that all the time. Yeah. And so there was that. There was originally the pitch for the 6th issue. I actually wanted to do more of a standalone piece, kind of like some of the like more poignant episodes of Batman animated series, and it was going to be an intermission episode where Bruce Wayne goes to look and see if there is a Bruce Wayne in the Ninja Turtles universe.
Oh.
And it was kind of like he was gonna see a Bruce Wayne that was gonna have a happier life than what he was cursed with, and that kind of thing. And I was really happy with it, and it got nixed right out the gate. No one liked it.
Well, would have been. I'll pitch you an idea. It could have been cooler if there was a Batman in that universe that was like a bat.
Well, there was. There would have been. I was going to explore more of the Man-Bat angle with a mutagen Man-Bat kind of
that would have been great.
Creature, which would have been fun, but it was kind of like they weren't crazy. But it's a crossover. It's weird if you establish that Bruce Wayne lives in the Nickelodeon universe. I don't think you can officially do that license-wise, or they didn't want to get into that muddy area. And it makes sense from their point of view. I just had a lot of these scenes that when I write a pitch for something, I have all these really cool scenes in my head, and I can't get those across in a one-page pitch. So I had these ideas that are just kind of like, all right, that's scrapped. Like some nice things I would have liked to do. But most of the stuff I got to, the scenes that I came up with before this one, I got to do most of them. Like that animated series title sequence was one of the first gags I thought of. I was like, oh, we need to do this completely. But originally I wanted that to be 3 pages. And then I was like, there's no way they're going to let me just stop the story and do 3 pages of the title sequence.
Like issue 4?
It was issue, I think...
It was a little later.
I think it was issue 5, because it was right when... it was when they were in Gotham. So the whole time they were in New York, and it was when Michelangelo and Robin went over to Gotham, and so I got to do...
It's a double-page spread of the opening.
Yeah, and I was like, it works because we're getting there, and it's kind of in the process of them trying to figure out... And I was like, that's a good enough excuse to use it, and then... But I asked John ahead of time, I'm like, can you do 8 panels on a page? Because that's a lot to ask, And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, don't worry about it. He's like, this is awesome. And so, and he just did it perfectly. I can't believe how perfect it was. I was so excited.
Ted gives me 8 or 9 panels a page on our webcomic all the time. So
I do. But I draw you panel layouts. I'm like, this is in my head how I think these could go.
It can get rough with that. Like, I actually did a Spider-Man story that still has not been printed, probably because it was a 9-panel grid comic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mean like Watchmen, like a 9-panel grid?
Yeah, it was a 9-panel grid.
See, that's an easy way to do it.
Yeah. So all that we end up doing on our YouTube channel is all very continuity heavy and nerdy and all this stuff. And I know that given the chance to ask you sort of these kind of questions I will take that chance.
Yeah.
You brought in Clayface, but you also mentioned in your past interview that you intended for this to be sort of set like right after or toward the very end of Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, kind of like loosely. That's what was always in my head. Like
but we have. I'm not like saying you're wrong about that,
no.
but I want to bring up how Clayface like theoretically dies in Batman the Animated Series. Like he melts into the water in his final appearance, and then if that's before your comic, but not before, then how is he still alive and all this stuff? I just wanted to bring that up. If you had sort of a headcanon explanation
for that,
you had yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I really went into it for thinking that like I did the same thing. I remember in my Justice League Adventures issue that came out, it was the same kind of comment with when Felix Faust was kind of dead for a little bit before he came back again. But like to me, whenever a villain dies at the end of an episode, because he came, Clayface is back for the holiday night and all that, and I'm kind of like, everybody's, he's fine. Like there's, he probably died. He came back a couple times in between. You know what I mean? So there's, and that's the same thing with
untold stories, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not as strict with that. Cause I feel like there's a lot of stories in between there which you haven't heard. Like, the whole. I think that the Lost Years could be a lot of stuff happening in there, which would be fun to explore and really get into the canon of it if we ever got to do, because that's where I would still probably set in that area for if we ever got to do a Batman Adventure series. Then I would probably be more strict with continuity a little bit, but this was kind of it was one of those things where it's just like something happened. It's from he got better a little bit, and then
he had the mud butt.
You're talking about the. Yeah, the 2-year gap between the Batman series. We had another question we wanted to run by you about if for anyone who's listening that's a Turtles fan, when would you say like there's a 2-year gap between issue 5 and 6 of the Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Adventures comic?
Yeah.
Would you say the Turtles world is also 2 years ahead, or is it Nickelodeon, so it doesn't matter?
Well, they don't. There was the problem with the Turtles was when we were writing the series, the Turtles were off in space and then they were gone, and like the timeline was all messed up, and they had to come they came back to the point they left, and there was all this stuff that was kind of happening as we were doing it, so it made it really hard for me to figure out exactly where. And I did figure out, I can't remember off the top of my head now, where I put it in somewhere where everything would make sense. And I think there's only maybe a couple characters that John threw in the fear splash. Like there's that splash where, although that would happen later, so maybe it happened after. But there's a splash where the Krang, they get the Scarecrow's fear gas, and so they see all these characters. And there's a couple Turtle characters that probably shouldn't be there if the timeline was perfect, but it's still a vision. So I'm like, oh, it's artistic license. I mean, Mega Man was there too, and Mega Man shouldn't have been there, but but that was John.
Right. But he sneaks Mega Man into all of his stuff.
Yeah. He does. Yeah, and apparently he just drew some Mega Man. I guess he actually got to draw an official Mega Man piece recently. So I just saw that he posted that.
Oh, that's cool.
So for the Turtles, it's only been like a month or two, like from the last one. It can't be a lot of time for them. So I guess the portals can work. They go to different like they've gone to like the 80s continuity where they've been in the 80s cartoon, and they've been to the Eastman Laird comic version. So they've been all over the place, and so I think that those portals work through space and time. So that's how we can kind of justify like
nice.
We got to skip time for Batman and not as much for the Turtles themselves. At least...
Yeah, I mean, we're such sticklers for that kind of stuff for the DCAU, so I know that the turtle stuff is going to be more like the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour or something, where it doesn't really matter. It just kind of happens. So,
and that was kind of, I'm more of the same way when it comes to like the comic continuity too. I did a book called The Batman Files, and I had to figure out when everybody appeared, because I'm trying to do the post-crisis version and mix it in a little with the pre-crisis and
best of all worlds.
Yeah, and kind of using everything, because Grant Morrison had the idea that every story counts. It happens somewhere. So even like the Batwoman stories happened and all that.
Might have been in his head.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
And so I was trying to fit all that in Batman Files, and I had made, back when I was just like starting out, I did even before I was even writing any Batman comics at all, I'd made a timeline of when I thought everything fit in, so I would know where to set my stories.
Like a year 1, year 2, kind of. What
and none of the.
Anytime you want to send that to us, it would be great.
What year?
Still have it somewhere.
Crime fighting career would you say Batman's on right now?
Oh, now that it's all been changed from Flashpoint and Rebirth. Now Rebirth, we have no idea what's going on. It's like this story counted. Maybe if we want to reference it, it counted.
Right,
it's kind of like the attitude. But I think we were around somewhere post. I mean, I think the 0 year timeline. I want to say they actually had an official timeline. It was somewhere around 10 or 15 years. I can't remember now.
Okay.
But and I think when you added all the Robin stuff, it was like he was easily past 15 years of crime fighting. You know, and then but he only he started fairly young, so it's still kind of work. You know, especially because he's more of with 1,000 different Robins. You know, he is more of a father figure these days than like the young gun, which is what they New 52 tried to make him the young gun again, and that didn't really work because he's still
like 5-year timeline.
Like,
they said, he's been operating before that.
Yeah.
Give him 10, but still,
and
you have a 10-year-old Robin.
Yeah, there's Robin. I think Robin just turned 13 or something, or 12 or 13. I forget. I think it's 13. And then there's you have Red Hood and Nightwing, and then they're like, oh no, they were there for like 10 minutes.
Right. Everyone got to be Robin for.
I trained you to be an expert in like half an hour. That was it was one of those.
That's it. So you got to do a lot of canon defining moments in the series, such as like explaining how Scarecrow got his new suit for the new Batman adventures, and you added Aaron Cash as an Arkham guard who's from the comics and stuff like that. Were there any others I'm forgetting, or
not too many. And that was only because I don't think anybody was really paying attention to like the Scarecrow idea. They're like, I doubt anyone looked up and said, did he ever design it somewhere in the comics, or something like that? And they're just like, oh, it's fine. It works for the story, and it wasn't, and they weren't that strict on continuity or anything. And it was kind of like me mining the store for continuity, and I was playing way faster and looser with continuity than I really normally do. And because like when I normally do tie-in books, I don't even like to introduce new characters. Like if I'm doing the Batman Strikes, which tied into the Batman, I didn't want to use villains that weren't in the show in case they were used later in the show, and then now the story doesn't make any sense anymore, because they would do that a lot. Like Batman and Superman met each other, and in the animated comic, and that always bothered me. I'm like, he met this long-haired mullet Superman, or like that Superman Batman magazine they had too, which introduced a lot of characters in the animated style, which I loved at the time. But then when they introduce them again, it always just makes like it's like, that ruined that story.
Adventures of the DC Universe.
Oh,
like
yeah.
That, which we're gonna bring up because John Delaney was your artist on the Justice League Adventures too, and he did all those.
Yeah, and I used to have all those. I don't know if I have every single issue anymore, but
that's a good one.
Yeah, and I read all those. I have. If you go back and look, I don't know if we've talked about this, but there is in 2 issues, I think, of Batman Adventures that I have letters written in the back as like
really?
Like an 8th grader or something, or like a 7th grade. I forget how old I was.
Awesome.
But they are terribly embarrassing. Like the one I actually wrote in because I thought the letter would get published, even though I knew the answer to it. I remember asking, like, was Harley Quinn made up for the series? I'm like, I know she's made up for the series. But like, even as a little kid, I was a Batman know-it-all. But I thought we're gonna print that letter, and they printed it. I was like, yeah, no, like that was that. So that's my first foray into comics.
Nice. It's always fun looking back at the letter columns and seeing like people who are pros now.
Well, I had a very short snippet in Detective and a very short snippet in I think Nightwing #1 I might be in.
Nice.
Back just like a really tiny. Well, that was when you could email your letters for the first time through AOL. It's like do you use our AOL page? And there was like the AOL chat rooms where the pros were coming on.
Right.
And that was like huge to me in high school because I couldn't go. I was in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, so I couldn't really travel to a lot of places. So it's like, here's anybody like
I still remember the
comics,
DC Comics message boards for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Rest in peace.
Sad time. Oh, and also if you really wanted to find the only artwork I've ever done in a comic is in Aquaman #69, when I was that was I want to say it was Dan Jurgens writing it, and I was an intern at DC at the time, and Tony Bedard, the editor, didn't want to we'd already sent the pages down to production like way too many times asking them for things. he's like, you go to art school, just draw a necklace on Mara on these panels. And I was like, oh God, all right. He like gave me like a Sharpie and Post-its. I was like, oh, some doing these terrible drawings. And he's like, all right, that's fine. This is good enough. And like, because the artist just forgot to
add the necklace.
Yeah, and so I had to do it in like 2 panels. I'm sure the artist was very happy with those pages. But I remember I was in student government at the time at School of Visual Arts, and we hung them up on the wall. We're like, look at this beautiful artwork. Like, even then I knew how awful it was, But it was like, that's my, to this day, my only artwork in a comic book.
Nice.
And I have an art major, So. But yeah, that was a sidetrack from whatever we were talking about.
I love it. Well, bring it back to Batman Ninja Turtles. If you had the chance for a sequel, how likely would it be for us to see Farmer Brown from the new Batman Adventures? Because he seems to fit perfectly with the connection to the mutant gin, maybe.
Probably not. I do have some ideas for some of. I don't want to say anything because we have talked about it a little bit. There's nothing in the works right now because Turtles is shifting completely to a new style.
Right.
And I don't know if I'm going to be. I've been told I'm going to be in the loop for that. I'd love to write for that comic just because anything Ninja Turtles is fun to write, and I like some of the interesting. Some of the designs are very different. I like when they go in different directions. I know there's people that get mad at every incarnation of something like, oh, this ruined, you ruined the Turtles. And it's like, no, those still exist. The old Turtles are still there. This is a different thing. We've already seen the old Turtles. Let's see something else. You know? So I'm always excited for new directions and stuff. So, but yeah, I have, I'll just say there's more, there's some faces from the animated series, the original one, that are more in line with mutant characters that I would like to explore some connections, like some, I guess, more beastly characters. I don't really want to say any more than that if I do get to do, because I have plots. I'd like to do more. I'd like to use some characters we didn't use in this. I'd like to do maybe use the Penguin a lot, which would be a lot of fun.
My mind's going to Tigress from the Tiger episode.
Yeah, there's and see, I know a lot of people hate those episodes, and I love those. All those. There's a lot of characters like that in that series that are kind of. A little that fit in very well with the Ninja Turtle world. So it'd be kind of fun to use those, or maybe even like, I don't know if they'd want to do new animated style or not, or if this would be something before that. There's not really anything saying that we couldn't have a story in between those. Like, it was just kind of like, especially if they met a different version of the Turtles.
I know I asked you at the Comic-Con if you could ever bring them into Batman Beyond times and have them meet Splicers.
That would be a lot of fun. I'd like to do too. I mean, there's a lot of, all those characters. There's an appeal of those, kind of like that animal human that mix with like Bebop and Rocksteady would fit in right in, those clubs, that Terry's doing that dance to, that club. They have that one song.
Well, Ted, do you think we should probably move on to non-TMNT questions?
Yeah, unless you have any additional thoughts.
I'm sure that if I had read the comic right before we talked, like I was supposed to, that I would. I didn't, so.
That's great.
But yeah, I put a lot of that. I put a lot of that stuff in my on my website when I went through the and talked all the little Easter eggs,
sort of thing. Yeah.
And then we did that director's cut where I didn't really do anything but tell a little story about Ninja Turtles. So that stuff's kind of already out there a little bit in the wild
for sure. Yeah, and I'm sure like the full collection's out there. You can buy that at stores. I'm sure all the issues are up in Comixology. So it's a good book. Hopefully we get more of it.
Yeah,
like it.
Hope so too.
Well, we can jump back to Justice League Adventures because that's that was one of the first series I ever collected as a comic book reader. Like I was reading JLA by Grant Morrison. That got me into comics. Then I just kept reading JLA, and I had a mail subscription that would come to my house. I would get JLA once a month, and I would get Justice League Adventures.
They're like folded in half and like shoved in your mailbox. Yeah.
Sometimes. But most of the time they were okay, but they come to me in the mail. So that's like Justice League Adventures, one of the first books, and I'm pretty sure I got your issues like in the mail that way. So
yeah, I bought a pack of the first 16 issues on eBay, and then that's all the comics I had for like 10 years. So.
Nice. Yeah, it was.
Well, yeah, that's all. Dan Slott's essentially it was his idea to do a book like that. So, and he reminded me several times that I have to thank him for it. I got an issue. He's like, "You got to thank me. I did that."
Right.
Because he pitched a whole bunch of ideas to DC, and then they decided they wanted to do different writers each all the time. And
we love his Batman Adventures run.
Yeah, it was some neat stuff. He introduced a lot of cool characters, and
canceled prematurely for the Batman strikes.
Yeah, but
it happens.
So, thanks, Matt.
Thanks.
Although, well, that wasn't me. I had to fight to get an issue of Batman. Well, because they had a regular writer on Batman Strikes, and it was kind of like I was like, I really want to do more. Justice League Adventures is gone. I want to do more titles, and so I was like, my first issue was supposed to be an inventory issue that was going to maybe never happen.
Right.
And then they liked it. My editor Nachi liked it so much that he just put it in right away. And then I got a call. That was still I think that's maybe the only time I ever got a phone call offer for a job. Was that he called me? People still called on the phone back then, in my day, and then it was he called me to do the Batman Dracula tie-in.
Oh right.
And that was supposed to be something that was just going to be released at Walmart. They're going to have a special edition with a comic book at Walmart, and then Walmart backed out of that deal too late, and so we ended up doing. It just came out as issue like 15 of the series. So it was like, and then after that, at that point, I'd done 2 fill-in issues, and they were both with Wes Craig. And then we started to do, they started to hire a lot of different writers, and that kind of became one of those things where there were like 5 of us writing for it, and you're trying to, there was a lot of good people in those books too. There was a lot of fun stories coming out of that. But it took me a while to embrace that style too, because I was still hung up on Batman animated series, and like. Right. And then
I remember Jackie Chan Adventures, so I watched that before this.
And it was like those things where that's one of the things that taught me to accept, like, oh, this can be interesting in its own right, like the like I don't know how many times I've had arguments with people about Teen Titans Go, and everyone's just like, oh, this isn't my Teen Titans,
right?
This is terrible, but it's like that was my feeling when the first Teen Titans came out, and I was like. And then I was like, well, this isn't my Teen Titans. My Teen Titans started in 1980 with the new Teen Titans. But then I'm thinking, well, that's not even someone else when that came out. I was like, this isn't my Teen Titans. Where's Harold and Bumblebee? Yeah, this was terrible. So it's like it's always changing, and it's like like you keep getting mad, you can embrace, And now I've just written my first Teen Titans Go issue.
That's right.
And because I think it's hilarious. That show is so funny, and I think the other Teen Titans got a fair shot. It ran its course. They did everything I think they wanted to do with it, or at least. It had a nice wrap up with the movie afterwards, and when you get to all the voice actors signing on because it's a funny, idea, it's like, well, why is there so much anger? Those same actors are doing it. They're like, no, guys, this is still good, but yeah, I don't know. Either way, it's very it's a very different take, and it doesn't hurt the old Teen Titans.
So, Justice League Adventures.
Let's go back to how I drew some necklaces in Aquaman. But yeah, so
this is from Teen Titans. I do want to ask: Do you think it's a part of the DC animated universe?
I actually originally wrote it that not Teen Titans Go, but but original Teen Titans. I in my head, it was Dick Grayson when he was young, before he becomes, before all that.
Because he's in college.
Before all that. Series. And it doesn't really fit in, but to me, that's
technology, because it's all,
and that's how I justified. Like when I did the Robin, I had Robin meet the Justice League in my second issue of Justice League Adventures, bringing it back to that.
Tim Drake, right?
Yeah, and so that's what I was thinking. Well, it couldn't be, and I remember people at the time were like, "Why don't you use the Robin from Teen Titans?" And I was like, "Well, or from Teen Titans," and I was like, "Well, it doesn't." I think. Or maybe that was Ask After. I can't remember when Teen Titans started. I'm pretty sure our issues were
there was
around
overlap.
the same time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's been a while since I worked on that. But that was, and I did that with Tim Levins, who I actually own the splash page of that. Well, my parents own it. I bought it for my my parents because my dad. I drew a Batman drawing in my dad's office. It was the worst thing ever. I was waiting, and it was on his dry erase board while I was waiting for him at work. And he kept that thing there for years, and I was like, "This is the worst drawing ever. I'm gonna buy you something for your office that you can hang." And it was my script and the splash page and the comic page all framed together.
Nice.
And then he only displayed that at home. He kept that dry erase Batman still in his work. I was like, "Stop it!" He's like, "I like it. It's Batman." I was like, "All right." But
Tim Levins is great. We had
he's fantastic.
Scott Peterson on a couple of episodes ago, and he only said the nicest things about Tim Levins.
Yeah, and both those guys are great. And I actually was hoping I requested Tim. I said, I remember my editor. I don't think Tim even knows that. We never spoke until afterwards. And I said, "Oh, I love this. Can I buy a page?" And that was like our only communication, if I'm remembering right. And I remember beforehand I did my first issue, and then Wacker was like, "Oh, we'd like to do a second issue with you." And I said, "Oh, do you know that Tim Levins guy?" And he starts laughing, and he's like, "Of course I know Tim Levins." I was like, "Can he do my issue?" And he's like, "I'll see what I can do." And then I didn't find out, and then I got the pages. Yeah. Like I was just happened to be at the DC office. He's like, "Oh, here's photocopies of your issue," and I was like, "Oh, all right, this is awesome." Nice. And it was like better than I could have expected. It was like exact because I've been a big fan of his. I was like, he's like the master of this style. After Mike Parobeck as far as issues go.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I wanted to really work with him, and I was very excited to do that. It was I think maybe the only time I've ever been able to request an artist on a project, but it worked out well. And
yeah, that's great. I love that episode. There's a lot of Clayface in that too.
Yeah, I did a little. Clayface feels like more. I remember getting a little blowback. What it was. No one reviews those things, but there was 3 people reading that comic. I think by the time, because it was like the second to last issue or something. And I remember being like, "Oh, Clayface is really kind of stopping Superman for a while." I'm like, "Yeah, it's all right." For the sake of the story, he needed to. We put everybody else in space, but at that point, and it could be foreseeable that Superman's having trouble, getting a hold of this guy for a little bit, which is it just happens for a few seconds.
I guess you have to, and because the Justice League cast is so large, you got 7 main characters.
Yeah, that was a rough book, especially because I'm more used to the street level type character. That's what always interests me. I've always read Justice League. But when it comes to that's what Batman and Ninja Turtles and Spider-Man, it's always those level of characters. And the cosmic stuff has always been harder for me. So it was like, even then, I was like, oh, I want to do Felix Faust because I love Batman and the Outsiders, and Faust was on the Outsiders in the 90s, his son. And so I was kind of like, oh, I love that villain. And actually in that one we had an inside joke that didn't make it in. And I think it was because they thought we were, I think they didn't get the reference. But in that story, Bruce Wayne is in one of the jail cells the whole time. And Batman he's I forget the all the details, but I wanted to do
Faust had mind controlled him to be a prisoner,
and so he comes and he rescues them. Robin figures it out, and on the jail cell it was supposed to say Frank Dixon, and because that was an alias Batman used in the comics of the 80s when he was training, and they just took that off. I think they thought it was maybe a tribute to Chuck Dixon or Frank Miller or something, but I was like, no, that's the name. When he was he used it more than once in the. I think I want to say Batman Chronicles. He might have used it in one of those issues.
Kind of like Matches Malone
in an annual. Yeah, it was like this. He was just going by this when he was. I think it was the first one was he was training with a detective that they brought back from 50s continuity to learn how to be a police detective. And it was kind of using this Frank Dixon name, and I was like, oh, that's a good Easter egg. So if you know that, you'll realize Batman's in that cell,
right?
And so it was kind of like. And I wanted, I like to have people be able to figure out the mysteries. We actually, John and I, we originally were going to have the scene in Central Park in Ninja Turtles take place, and I forgot to put it in my script, and I emailed John about it later, and I think he must have forgot about it, didn't have room. But it was supposed to take place in the Alice in Wonderland area of Central Park, where there's all these Alice in Wonderland themed. Around that was going to be a hint that it's Mad Hatter behind everything, but we didn't get to do that. One way or another, that didn't happen. We did do a couple little hints.
There were even in the first episode, you say something like, "Oh, we went down the rabbit hole."
Yeah, that was the first. That was like hey guys, it's Mad Hatter related. Yeah. That was that was really the only tease that made it in there. That was because you don't think Mad Hatter's going to be involved in this, very much at all if he even is. And I remember the early reviews. I still don't understand. Reviewing one issue of a 6-issue series or of anything or of an arc of anything. I don't get it because they'll be like, oh, this is I just read one recently and it was like, oh, this is a strong start to this, but it's not really anything yet. And it's like, well, it's like 20 pages and it's not it's not supposed to be an entire story yet, Right. So and I remember people some review said, "No, there's going to be no twists. It's this is going to be a straight up. If you're expecting twists, don't look at this comic." And I was like, "Really? All right." I was like, "You would know better, reviewer." And then we did get pretty lukewarm reviews because we were getting compared to the first Batman Turtles right off the bat. And then by the end, we got all these reviews that the same people were saying this was better than the first one, and we love this. And I was like, "All right, well, maybe if you waited,
wait till the end.
Wait till I do that theme song sequence that everybody likes." That's what everybody's waiting for.
Yeah. I noticed a couple of little Easter egg things in your Justice League Adventures stuff, like the Aquaman and Poison Ivy one. Oh, yeah. There's a fight scene at the beginning where they're on the beach and there's a bunch of starfish and stuff. It's very much Starro. Right? Oh yeah, there's starfish all over people. And they have to, that's those.
And there was that scene that didn't work in that. When I wrote it, and I really liked the scene. It was where everybody's getting attacked by. There's an aquarium and everyone's getting it, and Batman just freezes and he just has his hand up and it just didn't work. Because it wasn't animated. And in my head, I guess I wasn't visual. I was brand new to, this is my first superhero comic. And he was just supposed to stand there while these starfish, I think, attached to him, or squids, or whatever that sequence was. And he was supposed to just like signaling to everybody to stop. Yeah. And it was this cool sequence in my head, and I just don't think it worked on paper.
Oh, I remember that, because then all the jellyfish jump on him, and then Superman turns and he's like, oh, where's Batman? What happened to Batman? And then all of a sudden he zaps them all. He stings all the jellyfish.
Yeah, and then it's like, and there was a couple things like that that didn't get in. Like I remember he was looking at the computer, and at first you see his face, and it's like supposed to be a reflection of the computer screen. It's supposed to be covered in the spores that he's looking at. And I don't think the colorist did that, or that didn't happen. There was also supposed to be a scene where Hawk Girl leans in to, and like while they're talking in the Batcave. She was supposed to lean in, and he was supposed to get uncomfortable just being that close to Hawk Girl. Like, it's kind of like, nope, professional. Like I'm not close to anyway. You know, it's kind of like the Vicky Vale scene in the beginning of Batman, where when she looks at him in the Batmobile, and he like turns a light on her face, and she's like, oh no, light. And she can't fight against the light.
That's funny you say, because I remember reading that. And thinking like, oh, this is just like Hawk Girl's like a substitute for Alfred. She's like the person behind the computer, like bouncing off their ideas.
Yeah, there was supposed to be, and I think
without the sexual tension, Alfred doesn't have that element.
And I think not as much as I'd like to put in, but no, but there's some scenes, and I think I can't remember what made it in or not. There was supposed to be Batman. It was just it was supposed to start with Batman literally sitting in the dark, not doing anything, and then it was supposed to like something was supposed to happen on the computer. Like he was just waiting. And he's just like sitting, like meditating, or just doing nothing in the dark, as if he's doing nothing if he's not Batman, like literally nothing. And that didn't make it in either. And there was kind of like there's a couple sequences like that we had. There was some. I think we're just kind of like I was getting my sea legs, for the Aquaman pun issue, but also there was I don't think I'm also not. Even still today, I'm not. An editor's not going to 100% trust my instincts, because I'm still not, I haven't been doing a monthly book or something. So it's one of those, it's always like a little struggle. Like, no, trust me, I can do this. Like I was talking about this recently. I did a Spider-Man issue. That was my first Marvel comic. And there was a scene where I mean, I'm going to spoil it. But the idea was that Spider-Man was hung upside down, or Spider-Man hung a bad guy upside down on top of a building saying, he's like, yeah, the webbing lasts for an hour. Don't worry, it'll be fine. I'm going to call the police. They'll be here. I'll come back or whatever. And then he hears an explosion, so Spider-Man goes off to deal with the explosion. And so while he's gone, it's like 45 minutes later now, and the guy's still hanging, and the webbing is starting to get weak. And the whole story is from that guy's perspective. And what happened, he's like, how am I going to get out of here? I'm hanging upside down. He's trying to flag down the cleaning help inside the building and stuff like that. And then anyway, Spider-Man comes back at the end, and the joke is he webs him up again at the end. The guy's like, why are you doing this? Why are you webbing me up again? And then the joke is Spider-Man walks away in the back, and you see that the guy's only a foot off the ground. And I was like, that's the gag. Okay, he's not going to get hurt now. And so the editor was longtime editor, great editor at Marvel, and I still really like him. And we haven't got a chance to work together ever since. I don't think I think we co-wrote a book together. Tom Brevoort. He did one of the Marvel history books with me at one point. Or I did it with him, I should say, because he's been. I just tagged along at that point when he was still working on the kind of writing projects, and he had said, well, Spider-Man looks awkward when he walks. And he's like, we should have him swinging away, and I'm like, yeah, I agree with that, but the joke, and I was new, so I couldn't even. I argued, he gave me 5 notes, and they're all really good notes, except that one I didn't agree, but I kind of just agreed with all the notes. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna fight because this is my first thing. I don't want to argue, but I don't want to be difficult. Yeah. But then the idea was that walking home really sold the joke. The fact that he's still walking. And so the artist actually drew Spider-Man swinging away, and the way that he did it, the angle had to be different. So now he drew the guy hanging 6 feet off the ground. So if he falls, he's still going to get hurt. So the joke's not as strong. You get the joke, but it's not as strong. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, that walking home would have sold it. So it's like one of those times the new guy I think I was right on that take. But, just... At the same, you can't argue for, the editor has the final say on a lot of these things. I always think I'm right, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I am or not. I'm probably way off. But yeah. And Wacker did actually, to his credit for our first Justice League issue, Wacker added the good line at the end of the book, where it's in the middle, they're like, it's Batman, his city, his rules or something. Okay. And then at the end, Batman's swinging away or whatever, and they're like, I forget, Flash says something sarcastic-y and they're like, well, no, it's Batman, his city, his rules. And that was Wacker bringing that back, and I was like, "Oh, that was a good beat. I'll take credit for that."
Yeah.
Until this podcast,
Right. I read that it was because it was in the first page, and then the last page, like, oh, his city is.
It was a good little bookend.
And then you had that in the Robin issue too, because he's like, I was trained by the best.
Yeah,
and that's in the first page, and it's in the last page.
Yeah, I do a lot of bookending still, but that was one of the times I didn't have a good end line for that, and he came up with that.
That was a good one. Yeah,
I like that. I still like that one.
So with that issue, I just another continuity question, because I know that's what our fans are into. There's the Flash has no idea who Robin is when he's there on the Watchtower. Flash is like, oh, who's this little, what's he say? Does this little guy belong to anybody?
Yeah.
And he actually meets
Robin. In the script it said, does this kid belong to anybody?
Oh, yeah.
And I guess that was next, because you can't call Robin a kid, maybe? I don't know. But
So he did meet Robin about 4 years earlier in Batman Gotham Adventures. There's an issue with the Flash and Batman and Robin.
See, that's one of those cases, though, where that couldn't have been, because
they were both drawn by Tim Lovins.
Yeah. Tim should have said something. If we would have only communicated.
Right.
But I think it's one of those cases where a lot of those issues, when you introduce them before the series introduces it, that's why I was like, I always feel those get nixed then, like that.
It was very much the Flash from the Superman, the animated series. Yeah.
And I mean, in theory, that could have still happened, but it was one of those. One of those beats where I'm kind of like, if it's not, I tried to stay within the cartoon canon.
Nod where Superman is like, oh yeah, I've met him before. It's nighttime where he teams up with Robin, and
that was because it was in the cartoon where it's like,
right.
And that's really the way the editors approach all those. Is kind of like the books aren't necessarily in canon, even though I always take my stories in canon.
That's how we approach them too.
That's where the cartoon's the real canon, and then if it fits in nicely, that's the best part.
Yeah, it's nice
what works, what doesn't.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like you can't. That's when I like when doing the Batman files. It's like, well, this couldn't happen when this story thinks it. Like the way I did that a lot was when back then Batman year one Batman, or his first couple years, you just had the Black Bat.
Right,
and then he developed the Yellow Oval, so you could place stories visually right away. And then all of a sudden, does not make sense. People would throw in characters that shouldn't be there at that time, and it's like, it's annoying. Like, and there was no way like Batman year 2 could actually be the second year. There's absolutely no way, because year 1's literally the first year,
right?
And then Batman, there's all these other things that had to happen first when he was still with the Black Bat, and still with he had to meet the Joker, he had to meet all these other characters, and a lot of them will take place in holidays, and so there's all this nonsense where he had to disagree. You have to just all right, that's not a Christmas. That was something else. It was Christmas in July, sure. Just to make it all, to rationalize and make it all fit.
Yeah,
and I did the best I could with that. The only thing I'm unhappy with what I did was I did follow the post the post-crisis version of Man-Bat where he took place, where he was came earlier in the career, and it just doesn't really make as much sense. Like, he really should be around the same time as Ra's al Ghul and stuff.
Well, the animated universe, he's first.
Oh yeah, he's first.
So, very early.
Oh, and that's one story I never got to do too. I did forgot about that. I did a pitch for a 2-issue Justice League series when they were still doing, I guess it was Justice League Unlimited maybe, when they were doing it, but I don't know why it would have been 2 issues. I feel like all those were single issues. I'm not sure.
Most of them were, yeah.
But it must have been something where I had too big of an idea, and I wanted, and the idea was going to be the city is overrun with Man-Bats, and I was going to do an homage to that opening sequence, what they did in the Justice League Unlimited episode,
final episode, with the epilogue where he drives by the plane,
which was supposed to be the last episode, then another season, But it was kind of going to be a nod to that with the city is overrun with Man-Bats, and it's going to be. And then I think they did a story similar to that in Batman Strikes around the same time too, and I was like, oh, never mind, that was gone.
And Grant Morrison has all the Man-Bat.
Then he brought all that. Yeah, right. So. I just love Man-Bat, if you can't tell.
That's a good little transition to. I wanted to jump back to that Aquaman Justice League Adventures real quick. The main plot in that was he's going around doing all this crazy stuff that you wouldn't expect Aquaman to do, and then it turns out that Poison Ivy's been mind controlling him the whole time is why. And that issue came out around the time that the Batman cartoon aired, and then made it so that they couldn't use most Batman characters on the Justice League cartoon anymore. Did you have any issues getting Poison Ivy to be in that comic, or was that nothing around? Did they not care at all?
There's that Bat embargo. The Bat embargo is what they called it with the cartoons.
Well, no, they actually didn't. There was no issue whatsoever. The only issue I had was that they kind of put Poison Ivy on the cover. I was like, oh no, that's really the twist, but all right. I was like, there's a female shadow, it's definitely Poison Ivy. I remember showing it, I think to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. I was like, "This is," and she's like, "Oh, that's Poison Ivy." I was like, "You don't even know comics, and you know who that character is." I'm like, "Oh, that's great."
Yeah,
but
no surprise.
Yeah, so there wasn't a twist there. But yeah, there was never any kind of rule. Now there's more rules now with because I'm doing some of those capstone young reader, like the choose your own adventure type books or the you choose books, and we have a list of characters we can use and which we can't use, and there's some. I'd be like, oh, I forget. I'm trying to remember who I was trying to use, and they're like, no, I'm like, that one's off limits. And I was like, why? It was in the series or something, but it was just one of those.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that they have to be in Justice League. There's all these other rules. They have a certain amount they want to use, and they have to be kid friendly-ish enough, that kind of thing. But
yeah.
Can't
but
have
Mr. Zaz or anything like
that. No, yeah. but they do encourage you to use Cyborg because of his involvement in the movie, and kind of. Which was fun because the most recent one I wrote was almost like Cyborg is a new guy in the Justice League. And it was supposed to be really a Batman story, and then it ended up just being a Cyborg story. I'm like, I guess I'm just going to have the Cyborg, this whole time.
Do you prefer a Cyborg who graduated from the Titans to the Justice League, or who was just a Justice Leaguer?
Oh, no, yeah, I much prefer the New Teen Titans. Yeah, And, I mean, there was such a strong bond between all those characters, and Cyborg was he's very strong bond with Beast Boy, and, the whole group. And so it's kind of like when you lose, I think that was what New 52 lost the most for me was the Titan stuff.
I think so too.
Batman stuff, there wasn't much lost. There's a couple, it just bothered me that these stories didn't count anymore, but again, those stories are still there, But it's like, it's not as exciting to write if you're, I want to write this version of Batman. It's not as exciting if it's a different version. And they've kind of let it all, like Tom King kind of really let all that seep back in, and
yeah, he has.
And so and we've actually discussed some of that. There was that panel, there was a page of Grayson where he has all these quotes from all these different comics. And he was like, he said it was very hard to do that because he had to figure out which of these comics are still in continuity and stuff. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, I was looking, like trying to recognize all those quotes, and that kind of stuff. But and I think that's back in. And I think it was,
I like
we were just really missing that.
Snyder had an issue of Metal called Batman Lost, where there's a whole library in Wayne Manor where he's got a different library.
Oh yeah, I thought it was a really
major story,
a cool little bit. Yeah. And they've just put Martian Manhunter kind of back in place, I think.
Yeah, he's coming back.
So it's kind of like they're going back to that. I like the pre-crisis, but again, I mean the post-crisis stuff. Let's pull that out. But again, that's the problem with that is that caused all sorts of problems too. They had like Wonder Woman was like, oh no, like Wonder Woman's not a Justice League anymore. Now it's Black Canary, and so everything.
They go through that every couple of years.
Yeah, and it was like that was years of piecing those together through secret origin stories, and so it's kind of the same process again. And like
people Dan DiDio is on record for saying something like the DC universe needs a clean slate every like 10 to 20 years, or something like that. Probably 10 years.
Which they do, but it seems like I feel like the post-crisis stuff has really hit people in a way that's a little bit different because I don't know, maybe that you grew up with it, like, and that became your entire universe. Where the Silver Age, there were some things they were realizing, we're growing some of these characters up a little bit. The Golden Age stuff we're growing, and it doesn't really fit in. Like that's we can't have Batman be it in World War II or anything. Like that doesn't make sense anymore. And so I think that they adapted a little easier. There was a lot of protesting, but again, no internet. So you can't really. They weren't that vocal, and they're if they protested, it was whether it was if they chose to print it or within a fanzine or something, or your comic store people would complain.
Right.
I remember very clearly going to my comic store the week after Batman and Robin the movie came out, and everyone was so mad, but it was no internet, so there's only this little tiny hub of anger about this movie. And I remember they were mad about the dumbest thing, like you're not mad about the bat ice skates, none of that stuff bothered you, and it's something that they couldn't decide whether it was funny or serious. Well, what bothered them was that Barbara was Alfred's niece or something. They're so mad about Batgirl as Commissioner's daughter. I'm like, even the comics aren't clear on this at this point, like, because Frank Miller forgot her in Batman Year One, so it's like, then now she's his adopted daughter, and Devin Grayson's like, no, the real daughter, because they had an affair.
Because he was married to a Barbara, too, Commissioner Gordon, so it's just
that was the issue.
Messy. It's a little messy. Well, we got about 5 more minutes, so if there is any wrapping thoughts.
So about that necklace I drew.
Back to the Aquaman.
I'm looking for a question that I can bring up that'll be like, oh, I definitely don't want to miss this one.
We could do rapid fire. We could do 1-word answers.
The
answer's always Batman.
I did want to make sure
that
I did want to make sure that we got to I think you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but when you were writing the TMNT Adventures or the Batman TMNT Adventures, there were also either in production or already being released issues of other kind of DCAU-ish comics, like the Batman and Harley Quinn prequel sequel, and there was Paul Dini's like Harley Loves Joker backup series that was going on. Did you guys communicate at all between any of those teams to make sure that like you weren't stepping on any toes, or was it just kind of do your own thing? It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it was more of the second. It was kind of just like I think. There was no connection. I didn't get any notes from anybody about anything like that. It was kind of like Jim Chadwick is my connection at my editor over DC, and he was just kind of happy. Like I think it would just serve the purpose of the story, and it was pretty clear. I mean, especially because of the 5 issues were pretty much like flashback. It was in the older days. It wasn't as current, or didn't really bother anybody if we changed something, and we really didn't. We didn't have room to do as much as we didn't have room to like tell any much personal things like would have been fun, or like character beats as much, because you had to have like every character in each issue. We actually had to added a page of a fight scene between April and Barbara. I mean Batgirl. So we had more of a so they were in it more because I wanted to have them in it from the beginning. And then Nickelodeon was like, we need Splinter in it. I was like, where's Splinter going to go? So he just like walks through the sewer at one point and like freaks out April,
Yeah.
And then I wanted to put Ice Cream Kitty in there. So I had to put there was like that gag was Ice Cream Kitty. So there was like a lot of stuff that I just, if we knew we had 6 issues, I probably would have fleshed it out a little bit more. You probably wouldn't have got that. We wouldn't have got any of the Krang stuff. Mm-hmm. It would just been those, but I would have had a little bit more action beats, maybe fleshed out the Scarecrow story a little bit longer.
Yeah,
which I was having a lot of fun with that. Like that was one of the favorite, and that's when John was really like that was John's fault, because he said, I want to draw all these other characters. What about these other villains? And I'm like, all right. And so he has to draw a panel with like 50 characters, like Catwoman and Penguin, everybody that doesn't make it. Yeah, Condiment King.
Yeah, that's gotta be
anybody
hard.
I could fit in.
That's gotta be hard to try to fit in like everything. That you would have fanboy aspirations about, like, oh, this guy's got to meet this guy, and you only have 5 issues.
Yeah.
Like in like middle school, I started writing. I don't think I ever finished it, but I started writing a like Batman meets Spider-Man story, and I had like, oh, I have to have Lex Luthor and Penguin, or Lex Luthor and Kingpin meet, and I have to have the Joker and Hobgoblin meet because they're both voiced by Mark Hamill, and I have to do all this stuff. Yeah. But none of it like
there's too many things like that. Like like I did want to do since actually for that the sequel, I actually asked if we could use the 80s Turtles. Like, can it be a crossover? Like, can this they go to the Batman? I wanted to do with the original Batman animated series and the 80s Turtles, and they said no, it has to be the new version. Because I really wanted to do a scene with Summer Gleason meeting reporter April O'Neil, because that would have just been like ridiculous nonsense. Like no one would care except I'd be like, look, they're competing newscasters.
I would enjoy
that. But yeah, I love all those obscure characters that I can fit, because I've always gravitated towards obscure villains, which is probably why Mad Hatter was more in than other. But it turns out I never really liked Joker stories that much as a kid, but I love writing Joker. It's so much fun. Like those scenes grew exponentially. Yeah. And I realized, it's probably good because so many people love Harley now. Mm-hmm. And so the more I could throw in Harley in there, it's probably the better for the readers, probably like that. But yeah, the Joker stuff is just I realized it when I wrote a Batman Strikes issue. And I was like, oh, I get it now. He's just so much fun. And like there's like I always I like these stories, like who doesn't like Killing Joke and all these. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he can be I think some people don't get, they either make him like silly or too dark, where I think like he's genuinely funny, but it's so awful like his jokes normally. They're always like he's like an abusive funny, and so when I got to do and we didn't even get to do, it's all ages, so we didn't get to do that side as much, but there's still some like dark undertones of and I'm downstairs doing my bad Mark Hamill impression as I'm writing this the whole time, like making sure all the lines fit, and more than anybody else, like that was the voice I hear for almost any version of Joker. Like I've been asked that too about, when you write Batman, do you hear Kevin Conroy, do you hear Michael Keaton? I was like, no, I hear the Batman character that always, heard that voice as I was growing up as a kid, like in the comics. So I have an own voice for that. But Joker got whatever his voice started out in my head became Mark Hamill very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
One of those that just is like, and then it's so easy to double check that you have his dialogue right. If it sounds like something Hamill would say, then okay, that works. If it doesn't, it's like, no, that's too clunky, and I have to revise that again and again, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's got good flair to it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too I think about the animated universe is they started to get wrong towards the end, whereas and I love almost everything in the animated universe, but I do think like Batman went from being, if you look at how he is in the original animated series, which is my favorite interpretation of Batman and the thing, he starts becoming more and more of a dick. Like near the end, where it's like you went from being like the guy that's always right to being like kind of jerky about it, Batman. Like knock it off.
He's gonna confront the government, but he's gonna like hop into your bathroom and hand you your towel as you're getting out.
And I think that gets sprinkled in works, but I think there needs to be more of. And I think Morrison realized that too when he went back in 52 and had the 10-eyed man like chop away these parts of Batman. I think he was getting back to that Bronze Age Batman where he is right like 99% of the time, and he doesn't always have to like be mean about it. And I think the animated series was so popular. I mean, the Justice League is when I saw it more than anything, especially like the first couple seasons, and towards the end. And I think you start losing that other part of Batman where he's not. I mean, they do some good stuff in there and I think Justice League didn't do it. I guess it wasn't like an incorrect Batman. It was still the right Batman. But he started to get a little more rude, and then the comics just took it too far, and like Batman just became insufferable. And a lot of these comics are like, well, I'm not rooting for him. And like, I don't know how many comics it's like the Justice League is having a problem because Batman has a dark secret. It's like, stop being a jerk with your secrets, Batman. Like,
Batman went to a cave for a month. Didn't tell anyone what he was up to.
And now all these people are murdered because of it.
Doing nothing. What is he doing?
Yeah, that's what. When he's not Batman, he just turns off.
He just does nothing.
But I think that's I'm glad they kind of Morrison started getting away with it, and I think that 1 year later stuff when they were doing that, it was some awesome stuff. Robinson's 1 year later, and then like all the Son of Batman stuff on Morrison's run, he just got him perfectly. And I think Scott Snyder still does that, have that little bit of fun to Batman, and I think Tom King does the same, where it's kind of like, especially Tom King recently, the Batman Superman double date stuff that they've been doing. It's like you see him as
that's the time.
See him as a human. I have to pick up my daughter, but
that arc is great. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been good in the DCAU Batman's defense. So we do have that epilogue episode where he sits down with Ace.
Yeah,
and that's like the
and you do see that see that kind thing like more like every once in a while in the animated series. But yeah, I think it wasn't the animated series. I think it was just kind of so much you seeing that version of Batman so much that when it bled to the comics, they just took it too far. It's like when Dark Knight Returns happened. It was dark and gritty and amazing, but it was an exaggerated Batman from the future, and then that just became normal Batman for a while. And it's like, no, back up. Like,
of course, correct. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
We almost talked about some animated stuff.
We did. No, we did for sure. We got a good one. We should do this again sometime soon when we have a little more time.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Nice to meet you over there.
Yeah, it's very nice to actually speak to you. But
yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll do it again. All right. He told me to specify that he does not want to sound like he's calling Batman a dick, because Batman's one of his favorite characters, and I feel like I think that's how we left the interview off was with the last.
That is kind of
talking about like DCAU Batman's kind of a dick,
yeah,
and then we're just like, oh shit, it's time to go. So that's something we'll have to pick up the next time we talk to him and really dive into what makes the DCAU Batman the way he is, I suppose. But I was gonna say he's got like one of the like biggest Batman collections that I've ever seen, so he's definitely has an appreciation for the character.
Yeah, you showed me the secret pics that I'm not supposed to see.
Yeah, and they don't exist. They don't exist.
I mean, what secret pics? What are you talking about?
Right.
I was gonna chime in on the Batman
that sounds a
being
little sketchy.
Dick thing. Was that he?
It's a secret pics
of Matthew's secret room. Hashtag 50 Shades Freed.
Oh no!
So he Batman Beyond is really old and crabby and dickish, and I think that was probably on purpose. They were trying to push him more toward that by Justice League and that kind of stuff. and Kevin Conroy definitely uses his more like gruff old man voice in Justice League Unlimited than he did in Batman the Animated Series. I never really like noticed it before, but I was watching a pretty recent, I don't know how I haven't, but I was watching pretty recently a Batman the Animated Series episode. I think it was something with I can't even remember, but he has a lot more of like a airy kind of voice. Like when he's talking, it's more like this instead of like this, like he does all the time now. And so I don't know what like if someone told him to do that because he's younger, I don't know, but it's noticeably different. That's all.
That's an interesting
just
takeaway.
Want to point that out because I noticed.
Yeah. Well, cool. So
comic relief, I guess.
Well, we should definitely talk about Doomsday Clock number 3 because we haven't had a chance to dissect that.
Sure. Yes.
You've read it, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay, cool.
That's it. So moving on.
Yeah. So I guess we can start.
Batman's costume changes.
Yeah. You want to talk about that? So yeah, it did. It looks a lot like Gary Frank's Earth 1 costume.
Yeah. It's it's kind of like backtracking to a much more classic like 80s 90s Batman costume. It's got the yellow oval again. It's got he doesn't have his trunks anymore, but he's back to like blue highlights and a full yellow belt and all this stuff that we've been missing. But have we been missing it? Is my question?
We have, I think, because it was the
I'm not
suit.
A huge fan of the.
It was the suit right before the New 52 started, so it was like he had that oval during Batman Incorporated, and it got taken out right as the New 52, like trying to make him look younger and stuff. I don't know, but it looks a lot like that suit again, which is kind of cool to see. But yeah, it seems like we're going to get that again. And Superman is going to get his trunks back at some point, maybe. But not in Doomsday Clock, but maybe. I don't know. I blame Brian Bendis on that because he took over Action Comics and then like demanded a bunch of changes, including the red underwear. So they gave it to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, setting Doomsday's Clock a year in the future is kind of weird for those sorts of... upper level changes, I guess. Like you have to do this now. There's no way.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the purple cape.
Really, I like it.
But I did like the fact that the bat symbol most recently has like a yellow outline around it, and like no other Batman symbol has looked like that, so it's very distinguishing. Like this is from the rebirth era of Batman. Like, okay, I know now.
And you're probably not a fan of the purple gloves either. You don't like the original purple gloves.
Oh, I guess they're barely there, but but yeah, no, I guess this is cool. It's a little annoying that they're changing it with within a year or two of already changing it. So just like. Stick to something. Just DC keeps not
for a minute
trusting themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
A lot happened in this issue.
Yes,
a lot of Watchmen things. The comedian returned at the end of issue number 2, and at the beginning of this one, we get to see him and Ozymandias kind of have a throwdown. It's a bit of a revenge for what happened at the beginning of Watchmen. And so, like, we kind of see a flashback, too, of how the comedian survived that encounter. Yeah. As he's about to hit the ground, when he's thrown out the window, he's teleported away to what looks like Metropolis in the DCU. And he looks up and sees Dr. Manhattan. His feet, as all we see in the panel. They've been doing a good job of keeping Manhattan hidden in the current, at least, like... We've seen him in a flashback before in issue number 2, but
my theory is that he's hiding in the DC universe as a pair of feet. So that's all we see of him because he doesn't have the rest of his body.
Yeah, just severed feet. Well, who do you think he is really, though? Because I have a theory.
Yeah, well, you talked about you thought maybe he was Metron.
I did, but now I think he's Carver Coleman, who is the actor that we see in this issue who plays the character. He's Nathaniel Dusk. He's an actor. He's playing this like 1950s detective serial, and
okay.
There's like a clue at the end of issue number 3.
That would explain why that's in the issue so much.
Right. But at the end of issue number 3, we see like that he had a room, like when they discovered he was dead or something, there was a room that he had full of clocks, and like he was missing his father's wristwatch or something like that. It's like in very small print in the last bit of the issue. So I'm like, that's a very Dr. Manhattan-y thing to have.
That's a little unfortunate that like we've talked about this before with like the Star Wars movies, where nowadays everybody just gets to go home and like discuss on the internet what you think's going to happen. And this is the same kind of thing with anything, I guess, because like we're talking about like, oh, who's Dr. Manhattan? You might do this, we might do this, you and I, if the internet didn't exist. Well, I guess that's not technically true. You know what I mean, though. There's not going to be anybody talking about it without the internet unless they're just hanging out. And there's just like the even comic books are in a world of Dr. Manhattan's probably this guy, and then someone will figure it out, and then it won't be a big surprise anymore. So it's just a little dumb.
I mean,
I look forward.
It's the kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, we have no idea. Like last time we talked about it, I was pretty sure he might be Metron, but like now I think he's this other guy.
Right.
I feel the same way about Rorschach. I had a couple of theories about who he was after reading issue number 1. Now in issue number 3, we know that his name is Reggie, and he watched his family die in the like giant squid monster thing from Watchmen, and like we see that flashback play out, and then like in Wayne Manor, he's taking a shower and he like rubs his scalp bloody, which is crazy. So Reggie's got some issues. Whoever Reggie is, he's not a character I think we've seen before. So
I thought at first that he was just scratching his head and that he was like imagining blood, because we immediately slapped to the flashback of the squid monster. But I guess you're right that he probably is just like, God, get it out of my head, like so much.
Yeah.
Cuts himself with his fingers.
Yeah, he might be a little crazy, which is why Batman locks him up in Arkham Asylum at the end of the issue, which is pretty awesome that he kind of tricks him into going into what looks like the Mad Hatter's old cell. Yeah, I think while he's there in Arkham, he's probably going to encounter Saturn Girl from the Legion of Superheroes, because we know she's been in Arkham from what we've seen in DC Rebirth and The Button, and so it seems like a natural progression of those plot threads to have them encounter each other in the next part.
It was definitely a surprise, like as it should have been. When I think you're going to turn the page and see Dr. Manhattan in the cell or something, but then you just there's nobody. It's for you. So that was pretty cool.
But maybe Batman was serious about like that time anomaly, because Saturn Girl is there, So maybe his
that's true.
The analysis was right, but. We'll see. Another mystery.
It just means that they can't do anything with Saturn Girl or any other of those kind of characters between now and a year from now. They just have to keep. Oh, God damn it! She's still in Arkham. These things
right. Well, we saw her briefly in The Button when she's watching that hockey game, and she's kind of freaking out because she knows, like, oh, this is the hockey game where the Button stuff happens. I don't know.
It's in the history cubes or whatever. The Button stuff. That was 2019 or whatever.
Another mystery. Mime and Marionette, who are like the Joker and Harley, they are looking for their kid, who I guess are pretty sure that the kid is on the DC universe somewhere. Like, that's probably why Ozymandias brought them along. Because he knew that Manhattan knew where the kid was, but I'm thinking now that like the kid was probably brought into the DC universe. And so doing the math, like the flashback where we see Manhattan like first encounter Mime and Marionette, and like he sees that she's pregnant, at least had to be 7 years ago, because there's been 7 years between 92 and 1985. Sure. And so, but we can assume that it's probably even more than that, because that was like the bare minimum of time. And like, there was obviously like they encountered Manhattan before the events of Watchmen. So this kid is probably in his teens, I would say, if not a little older. Like he could be a young adult. So it's really interesting. Friend Jesse, who we had on the podcast last week, texted me. He was like, "The kid's Tim Drake. That's why Mr. Oz kidnapped Tim Drake and brought him to his thing, because that's Mime and Marionette's kid." And I'm just like, no. Like, it's not Tim Drake. I don't know. Like, it's got to be someone else. Like, he said that because it was like, they have the same colored hair. Like, yeah, maybe. But I think that Tim Drake got taken because of his ties to the Young Justice characters and how Connor Kent's missing from Rebirth. Cassie Sandsmark and Bart Allen aren't there either. So I think that's his importance there in some capacity. I don't know, but I'm thinking maybe the kid might be the Joker. I don't know.
What I was about to bring up, but I don't like if you're saying that this book is supposed to explain the three Jokers thing, or that's what it's been press has said so or whatever. But if you're saying he's teenager wise, but I guess Dr. Manhattan can mess with time and whatever, so. It could be anybody. It's all fictional stories.
It could be anybody, yeah. Yeah. I mean, who knows who this kid is, yeah. But he's probably there somewhere.
I mean, it would make sense for him to be the Joker based on who the parents are.
Especially if one of the Jokers grew up without any parents, you know? And, like, we get some sort of backstory. Because we know the Joker is going to be there soon. They're going to run into the Joker very soon.
Yeah, I think he's on the cover of the next issue. So, he should play a part. That's one of those things. I think I've talked about it before, where I don't want to know where the Joker comes from or what his name is or all this stuff. Like, I like that he has a mysterious past and all this stuff, and that I don't like the idea that someday you'll just be able to go on Wikipedia and Joker's real name is
Jack
Watson,
Napier,
and he was born in Ohio, and just all this, like, I don't, because
his favorite color is purple.
It just ruins things.
Yeah,
check out our video on keep epilogue a secret, keep the Joker thing a secret.
Identity, keep his identity a multiple choice question.
I didn't really read anything. I read Metal, the latest Metal, so I guess we could talk about that. Was that number 5? That was the second to last one, yeah. And
the penultimate issue.
Yeah, it's a lot of setup for hopeful payoff in the final issue, because not a lot happened in this one. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Okay, that's the opposite of what I want to say. A lot of stuff happened, not a lot of things were like explained,
moved forward,
or whatever. Yeah, it was all happening in the same like moments that we left at the previous issue.
Right.
But I do look forward to seeing what happens to Batman and Superman, because they kind of melt into like
the lava.
Yeah. And Wonder Woman
and Hawkgirl
like in the brain, but she's okay, and
she's with Lady Blackhawk. Which is such a dumb thing. It's like, if you're gonna have a splash page reveal from the last issue, and like it just I don't know, they set her up to be like a villain, and now she's
it's solved in 2 seconds.
Well, I like seeing the team up between Aquaman and Deathstroke. That was random.
Yeah, that is kind of an interesting thing. Does Aquaman have his long hair and everything in his normal book now, or is
I think
thing?
He does, and the beard. Yeah, they gave that back to him recently after the movie.
Okay, that makes sense. We're gonna make him cool again. Remember how Aquaman is cool, buddy?
Remember that? He listens to the White Stripes and chugs whiskey and smashes the bottle.
Right, exactly. But then he also is a silly guy the whole movie. We got the Batman Who Laughs has a bunch of monologues. Yeah. All right.
Batman Who Laughs is a great villain. I hope that he sticks around for a little bit. I think Batman Who Laughs is supposed to be in a couple of the New Age of DC Heroes books.
Okay.
There is one more metal special that is called The Wild Hunt, that is about these Dark Knights, and I think The Wild Hunt is supposed to take place in between issues 5 and 6. So I think it's like, I'm looking predominantly
to see if I took a picture of this. Maybe I didn't. Keep talking.
Well, all I know is all those Dark Knights are going to be back in the Wild Hunt issue, and I think it's just going to basically play out the big battle that we saw teased at the end of issue number 5, but we'll see for sure. that comes out pretty soon.
I think it was Scott Snyder, but I'm going to confirm this. He tweeted, someone asked him about, yes, okay, like all the metal, even all the tie-ins, every metal title has just completely sold out, like in the first week, every single time. And he's talking about, he tweets so much, this man. Where the heck is the one I'm looking for? There was one where he was talking about, hopefully I can find it, where he said that, or someone asked if Batman, like, will ever meet the Batman who laughs, because they think that would be a really, the Ghost City on Twitter asks if you're answering questions, are we ever going to see Bruce confront this guy? And it's a picture of the Batman who laughs, because it seems like there'd be an interesting reaction. And he said, it would be fun, right? To see that? Hashtag DC Metal 6. Oh. So I assume that the final issue, they will meet each other.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Based on that pretty obvious clue there. Mm-hmm. So that could be pretty fun.
Well, the last issues...
That's definitely like... Because he is Bruce Wayne from wherever whatever his world is. But he's basically the Joker, so... That'd be pretty gruesome.
It's a nightmare, for sure. It's like Bruce being like, wow, I became the very thing I've never wanted to be.
Hey.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting last issue. I feel like it's going to leave us a little unfulfilled, only because we know that it's setting up this new line of books, like the New Age of Heroes. It's setting up like Batman and the Signal. Yeah. Scott Snyder has another event coming called No Justice, which might be dealing with this dark multiverse too. I don't know. I just think it's going to leave a lot of plot threads still open that he's going to be playing with on his Justice League run.
Right. Yeah, in some ways that's fine, but it does bother me whenever we get a big old story like this, like a huge event that's, oh my god, it's shattering everything, and everything you knew is a lie, and blah, 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 and then, but even Doomsday Clock said a year from now, all these other titles that they're advertising in the pages of metal, all these, like, Batman is not gonna die, I know, just don't, why even tease that he's dying? I know he's not going to die.
That's also a matter of, like,
so I don't know.
DC used to be a little more meticulous about releasing books that, you know, ruin the endings of things, like, because we already have Batman and the Signal, which takes place after these events, so we know, like, oh, they're totally fine, but, like, in the past, they might have delayed that book until after issue number 6 was out, you know? But, I mean, when you have solicitations and stuff, and we get to know the books that are coming, like, 4 or 5 months in advance, like, it's hard to do that. So, spoilers are going to happen.
Again, the internet ruins everything.
It does, yeah. It's evil. No, it's not. It's a tool. It's a great tool.
Yeah. No, I love it. If we want to continue off from this segment, I want to pose the question. You can chime in if you don't like this idea, but I want to potentially throw out we need a name for our, like, mail segment.
Oh yeah.
And I want to, like, get ideas from people. I want people to submit, like, oh, call it this, call it that.
Like the letter column of the podcast.
Thoughts. I'll bring up the document. Yeah. The internet's really slow because I'm talking to Ted on the phone. Oh my god, James, find the doc. There it is. Okay. So we had some ideas already. This is for, like, the segment where we read letters from people or emails or whatever. So we got the mail room, which is, like, in Justice League comics. There's the Watchtower room, I believe, is why
it was from the like satellite era. Like their letter column in the back of the Justice League issues was called the mail room. So that's a little bit of comics nostalgia there.
I see. Yeah. I see. I think it's kind of generic.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's also we just kind of trying to come up with random stuff that from the DCAU, so it's DCAU specific, but there's not really anything to go off of. We could call it the press room, because there's a Daily Planet press room in Superman in the animated series. There's also the episode of Batman where the ventriloquist, he gets a job as, like, the mailman in Wayne Enterprises. That's the episode Double Talk.
Yeah, we could just
I
call
don't
it
know
Double Talk.
Yeah, but that seems like a good podcast name, not a good a good name for whatever this is. And then maybe something with the Bat computer, or like I was trying to come up with like infamous letters received by characters in the DCAUs. There's like Andrea Beaumont's like marriage rejection, but it's not like a happy thing that we would want to.
So here's the part of the podcast where we have the marriage rejection letters.
Need time. Forget about me. So anyway, if you have an idea for that, go ahead and let us know in the comments, or send us an email at info@watchtowerdatabase.com. But let's see. I took a screenshots of something. I did want to give a shout out to the Timm Talk podcast, is Timm, like Bruce Timm, because they shouted us out again.
Oh, nice.
That's a weird verb.
We got shouted out. We got shouted at it.
Because I've been communicating with them about. I think their names are Chris and Cameron. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I've been talking with them on Twitter, private messages, because we've been trying to get on iTunes for forever, and now we're finally on iTunes. They technically didn't help at all, but I appreciated their support.
Yeah,
I figured it out on my own, but it's okay. I understand they're busy guys. We're busy guys. But yeah, they told us it's a great podcast. Us.
Aww.
But I will also say that they have a great podcast. They do like reviews of episodes from the DCAU. I think they're going through like one by one.
Mm-hmm.
They just did Little Girl Lost parts 1 and 2.
Right.
Is the most recent episode. They have a lot of knowledge like we do on that kind of stuff. So it's fun to listen to them talk about the episodes. That's all I have to say about that, I guess.
We've had a lot of people ask us to do episode reviews too, and that's such a heavy undertaking. So I'm glad that it exists somewhere. Yeah. So go check them out.
Oh, and then I have one. This is from Andrew Kotzini on YouTube. I commented, I had a suggestion for some upcoming episode of 12th Level Intellects regarding the impact of the JLU episode, The Once and Future Thing, on the Batman Beyond pilot Rebirth. Specifically, I was wondering if you guys think Bruce in any way remembered Terry from his trip to the future as a big plot point for the remainder of JLU. Was that Batman and Green Lantern remembered it despite the timeline being erased? Now, sure, Bruce never learns Terry's identity in that episode, but he certainly could recognize his voice and remember the Batsuit that he later makes for himself was the one that future Batman was wearing. Personally, I like to think that Bruce and John lost those memories as time passed and the timeline had been erased for a longer period of time. But I would love to hear your opinions on this. Keep up the great work. So, what do you think about that?
I think they definitely are going to remember. Like, you're not just going to forget that. And, like, there's that whole episode where... Like it comes back, and at the end of JLU, Hawkgirl goes up to Batman and is like, tell me about my son, you know? Like, she wants to know about Warhawk, and from that, the whole adventure. So there might be a parallel world now where Bruce kind of kept that to himself when he meets Terry, because, like, why bring it up? Like, it's, if it never happens, it never happens. And it's like, it's just Bruce has his secrets, and I don't think he'd ever just share that kind of thing with Terry right off the bat. Like, he's only going to bring it up when it's important. So I don't personally think it changes any of the events. But, you know, it's a cool way to think about it. Like, maybe there's a different timeline where he didn't know, but now that he does know...
Yeah, it's either that episode either says there's like a diverging Star Trek-y timeline where now there's two different futures or whatever. Like maybe JLU will continue into a different future without exactly the same Batman Beyond stuff. Or it's just saying that Bruce Wayne always knew about that stuff, and he's just a weird old guy that he didn't need to talk about it. But I mean, it is kind of weird that he would make the exact same Batsuit that he sees in the future, because he seems to be the kind of guy that would not believe in like destiny or coincidence or all that stuff. to where he would probably like, oh, I see there's a Batman in the future wearing a completely black costume with a red bat symbol.
Right.
I will make that exact costume. Like, that sounds pretty good. Like, it's kind of weird that he would do that. But, I mean, mostly that episode is so that they can be on screen at the same time and us fangirls can squee.
I mean, he also had inspiration from Batwoman. Batwoman and the
true.
Justice Lord's Batman also had the same logo, you know? So he's, like, seen this in the past. I like to think maybe he was building it and he's just like, you know what? That was a good design.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the guy that comments. I already forgot his name because he's off the screen.
Zini.
I'm sorry.
Zini.
Sure, Zini. He's kind of maybe hinting at the idea of if Batman erased that timeline with his little disky poo, that maybe eventually, like, through whatever mystical time travel shenanigans, his memory of that just fades away, like Back to the Future photographs or something like that. I think is what he's kind of getting at.
I mean,
instead of just like literally forgetting about it.
I'd say maybe, except that we had that Hawkgirl thing happen that I mentioned, how she, you know, is told about that later on and tries to learn more about it.
Yeah, but that's only like a year after they do that. So
true.
I'm saying like maybe by the time he makes that Batman Beyond suit, he is forgotten about it. I mean, but we have no evidence to go off of that that's the case. We just have what we have. So it's all speculation, I guess.
I think he's too smart to forget things like that. He's Batman.
Well,
Batman never forgets.
Yes. Batman don't forget. Yeah. Machete don't text.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
I guess that's pretty much the end of this then.
Send us your questions.
Yeah. The info at DCAU, or no, my God, I always say that wrong. Info at WatchtowerDatabase.com. We're at DCAU Watchtower on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm also at JT Strecker on Twitter.
And
you want to
am not that active on Twitter, but I am hoping to be soon. I need to tweet more often. But you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Ted Kendrick. And there's either going to be a dot or a hyphen in between Ted and Kendrick, so you just figure that out. I don't remember which is which.
I tag him and stuff so you can see the tag and follow and figure it out. Yeah, so we're on the internet, as we've mentioned before. The internet's so great.
It's not evil at all.
That's it, I guess. This has been the best, most cohesive episode where we can definitely hear each other at the right time and there's no delay between Google Hangouts in any way. So if you thought that while listening, you're wrong.
What'd you just say?
Oh my God, Ted.
Okay. Bye.
Terrible joke. Okay, that's the end. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you later.